I'm Aryeh Schwartz alongside Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. Staying alive, staying alive, staying alive. Lynx force Game 5 with an epic Game 4 in Minnesota. Let's dive right in. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at Winsidr.com. That's patreon.com/Winsidr to support and to read the content, Winsidr.com. Welcome back to the show. Before we get into it, I want to remind our friends, our listeners, anybody who likes the W, we're doing a giveaway. We've partnered with Homage. We're giving away a WNBA team hoodie and a t-shirt of your choosing. You could pick to have one of the new designs, the championship, the finals design. All you have to do is email Aryeh at winsidr.com. That's ARYEH at winsidr.com and share with us your favorite WNBA memory. Rachel Galligan, woo! How's your heart feeling?
Great. We've got 1 day left of the 2024 WNBA season. It's kind of cool for it to end this way. I know I've predicted it from the start, so, just giving myself...
Doesn't matter if people disagree and question your predictions.
No, I mean, I think anybody who knows both of these teams understands, just how tough of a matchup this was, even dating back to the Connecticut Sun matchup. I felt like that was such a chess match. And then, when the finals got set and it was the Liberty and the Lynx, it's like you really start to analyze it. Even though the Lynx have had the Liberty's number, it doesn't feel the same at all. And there's just no way I saw the Lynx losing two games at home. I just didn't see that happening. And so the fact that we've got a Game 5 WNBA finals, this is what it's about. This is what we're here for. This is what makes these moments so special. Super excited. That game last night, it definitely didn't disappoint. That's for sure. What were there? 150 lead changes and 75 ties.
It was like 13 and 12 or 8 and 12 or something
14,
like that.
14 lead changes. It was tied 13 times. It was kind of the first game of this series that's been just back and forth like that. There's typically been like a really hot first quarter. And then somebody's coming back throughout the course of the game. This game 4 just was so back and forth. Liberty would take the lead. Lynx ended up, taking the lead. It was just a great basketball game. It was just a great basketball game. And I think everything that everybody was kind of expecting, the Lynx especially, we're not going to go down without a massive fight.
Well, the thing that I thought was really cool about this game to that effect was that it wasn't like one team held the 6-point lead or the 5-point lead for, 10 minutes. And then it was very much so like a back and forth game. One team would take a 5-6 point lead. The other team would immediately charge back in, tie the game up.
An 8-0 run. Yeah.
It was insane. It felt almost like the full game, the story of those early games in one quarter or in like a minute split, where it would be like this amazing push from one team, then the other team, then the other. It was such a fun game. It was exhilarating. It was crazy. I was catching my breath and I felt like I ran after it.
No, the first quarter especially, I was like, man, I'm exhausted. Like the pace of the start of the game. And I think fatigue started to play a role there in that second half in the fourth quarter. There were stretches where both teams were missing shots and easy shots, like just gaps in time where both teams just looked, and obviously, right? Goodness, how could they not be? But I was looking at the stat sheet after the game, and me, just analyzing the game. It was really fascinating. Both teams were 9 of 23 from the 3-point line. So that's 39.1%. Thought that was interesting. Minnesota Lynx shot about 44.6%, and the New York Liberty shot 43.7%. Now, there was a shot differential. Liberty got off 71 shot attempts compared to Minnesota just 65. A lot of that had to do with New York Liberty's offensive rebounding ability. Liberty were dominant again on the glass, out rebounding the Lynx 40-31. that's an area that is really concerning for me. Just how dominant the Liberty have been, especially on the offensive glass, and just Minnesota's inability to just, I don't even know what it is. It's not like you expect them to dominate the Liberty on the glass, but just there's some big differentials there. And that's something that the Lynx really hang their hat on and something they take a lot of pride on. And then on top of that, the paint points. Liberty have controlled that 38-26 was all that Minnesota have. But I want to say thank you. Someone pointed this out to me on Twitter last night when I was going on my stat tweet rants. One of the biggest
first of all, thank you for the stat tweet rants. We all love them.
I don't know if anyone actually loves them or not, but I just find it fascinating because it tells the story of what's happening on the court, and you can really pinpoint the biggest areas. It's one thing to watch the game and kind of have this idea of, okay, this is what's going on, but it's another to look at the numbers. There were so many deflections and turnovers in that game last night on both sides. I mean, how many times did both teams kind of bring the ball over to the wing, pick it up, on top of their head, looking to make a pass, and the length and the deflections that took place? There were so many of those, and then some passes that just felt a little lax, in my opinion, that got picked off. And everybody knows you can't do that against the New York Liberty. And it felt like, to me, they were dominating that category. But if you look at it, Liberty turned it over 16 times, Minnesota only 13. I would have thought it honestly was a little bit higher than that. But the Minnesota Lynx actually capitalized on that much more than New York. 19 points off of those turnovers Minnesota was able to capitalize on. And New York, only 10 points off those turnovers. So that's kind of interesting. When you watched the game, I felt like that was a major area of concern where, the Liberty were just having their way. Whenever they would turn the ball over and they'd get out in fast break, they'd have Jonquel Jones running, slashing through the paint. She's, 1 foot around the rim. You can't stop that at that point. But really, when you look at these numbers and, the Liberty won a lot of categories, a ton of categories that, a lot of coaches would say, those are the categories you have to win games. But the biggest differential in my mind outside of those turnovers was the free throw line. Liberty just 9 of 9, and the Lynx ended up 15 of 20. So we know Cheryl Reeve went on that rant. I'm curious your take, because after the game, Sandy Brandello kind of followed the same playbook, if you will. To me, watching that game last night, I didn't sit back and think, okay, this is one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen in my life. I felt like, okay, yeah, there's some, maybe I'm desensitized because I watch so much WNBA, but I didn't sit back and think this is so brutal. I mean, I think there were some ticky-tack calls on Stewie. There were some missed no calls on Stewie. What is your take about the foul differential, the comments after the game, the free throw line, stuff like that?
So I want to preface this as always with, I am born and raised in Minnesota. The Minnesota Lynx got me into the W. So
yeah, your emotions are starting to play here.
Yes. So I'm fully throwing that out there. So I want everyone to I'm acknowledging that from the beginning. I want to acknowledge that from the beginning because I am attempting to take a step back. And when I look at it, that first game, I think on both sides was game one, horribly, one of the worst refereed officiated games I have seen in recent memory. Maybe it's recency bias, whatever. Throughout the series, what I have seen, and again, maybe this is from somebody who has more of an affinity towards Minnesota. It seemed to me like there was a lot of physical play. And look, when it comes to Jonquel Jones, we've seen this with BG, we've seen this with Sylvia Fowles, we've seen this with other players. It's really hard for officials to officiate players who are so dominantly oversized compared to other players. This has been a historic thing when you have somebody who's 2 feet taller and they're swinging around trying to do normal movements in the paint. Yeah. It ends up looking a little bit more physical. So with some of those JJ, twists and turns and elbows, I will push back to the Minnesota fan base and say, look, while JJ, I'm not going to sit here and say JJ is the cleanest player to ever play. I don't think she's a specifically overly dirty player. I think that often especially in this setup, in this matchup, you have her going up against undersized players. So there's going to be some physicality with that. I think you laid it out perfectly with Stewie, where last game, and let's be clear, I think often in games you see refs do makeup calls. And sometimes in a series, you'll see a next game refs make makeup calls. I'm not for a next game makeup call. I understand if it's in the game. Game 4, Stewie got away with a lot. Fee was getting beaten and nothing was getting called. It was ridiculous. In this game, I agree with the stance that you had, which was, look, Stewie got called for a lot of bad, stupid, whatever you want to call them, ticky-tack fouls. She got away with a lot of other calls. So I almost viewed those ticky-tacks as making up for, like, Stewie tackled Fee when she was cut into the basket to make a shot. The ball goes out of bounds on Fee's hand. And like they reviewed it and they're like, yeah, that was clearly a foul on Stewie, blah, blah, blah. Those were major impact plays for me. So like if I'm the Liberty, I'm upset that Minnesota got 20 free throws, right? You would argue ball don't lie on some of those. That's why you missed 5 of them. On the other hand, you can't be that mad at the officiating when they gave a free pass to Stewie on that tackle of Fee under the hole. And then also with that whole not upgrading on Benijah Laney earlier in the game when Kayla McBride gets a 3 off, she gets fouled. That should have been an upgrade, which gives them the ball back. And the only reason I'm bringing that up, because in a one possession game, those are the things that kind of, in my mind, stick out when it's a foul plus ball back, or when that's an immediate opportunity to get points. So I think, look, both teams have a right to be extremely upset with the officiating. This is the WNBA finals. It should be better. That said, I think both sides have a thing to complain about and a thing to kind of be like, I don't want to complain about that. And to the same thing in game 3, right? Minnesota had many arguments to make. New York had many arguments in game 4. Don't let the refs dictate the decision. When I did the episode with Mitchell, it was like in game 3, excuse me, New York made the shots to win the game. Minnesota didn't, and the refs didn't help Minnesota. In game 4, Minnesota made the shots to win. New York didn't, and the refs did not help New York. And so it comes and goes. It's a series of 5. Like, you're going to have games where it's worse and better and all that jazz. What's your take?
Yeah, I just don't think I don't think you can put this on the refs. I mean, both teams had their opportunities. I mean, there are major opportunities throughout the course of the game. I think, just looking at the shot chart, and I'm just talking here, but looking at the shot chart, the New York Liberty, I mean, obviously both teams shot a lot of threes. We talked about that earlier in the show. The Liberty then, they attacked the paint. I think the Liberty were getting to the paint on fast break opportunities when you had Jonquel Jones running the floor, in transition off of turnovers, off of quick rebound situations. So those were clean looks at the basket. Mm-hmm. Then there was a lot of slip action that Liberty were running, getting to the rim where they'd have basically a wide open layup. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously, there were some post-up situations and they controlled the paint. That's the thing that kind of makes you wonder a little bit. Okay, they're pounding the paint inside as much as they were. They won it 38-26. They only got to the free throw line a handful of times. So it's kind of like, that's an area that, the numbers, I don't know if they necessarily add up to me. However, when you look at the shot chart just a little bit through the total game, the Lynx actually forced New York a lot of like 10 to 12 foot shots. And they shot a lot more than the Minnesota Lynx, and right across like the middle of the paint out to the extended, short corner area. And there's a lot of misses there. These are these little runner situations in the paint. These are just, between, like I said, 8 to 12 feet from the basket extended out a little bit. And there's a ton of X's there for misses. And on the flip side, you look at the Minnesota Lynx, there's a couple of them, but it's actually extended out a little bit more. They shot a lot of threes. They shot a lot of 17-footers. Some people would say those are bad shots. There was one towards the end of the game that about made me want to pull my hair out that I thought was going to lose the game.
What are you doing, Courtney?
Oh, my God. Now, granted, if she makes that, we're all like, oh, my God, she's amazing. But I was like, what is that shot?
Courtney's the epitome of a player who fans, when she's going up, you're like, why are you okay,
and that's
you know what I mean?
like an emotional roller coaster, like for like a second and a half from that entire thing. But anyway, just looking at the shot chart, if you guys have an opportunity to go back to the game and look at it, you'll see that the Liberty the Liberty were forced to take a lot of, or settled, if you want to maybe say that, those little 10 to 15 to 12 foot runners in the paint and missed a lot of them. And so you could make the argument, how aggressive were they? Getting downhill, getting to the rim, initiating contact, getting to the free throw line. Again, I'd have to go back and really study the whole freaking game. And honestly, it's not that important. We're just talking here. But I do think that's an interesting, and more than anything, I mean, if the Liberty are going to demand the paint and control it the way they have, the Minnesota Lynx's shot-making ability from 17 feet extended, it's impressive that they've been able to do it so well. And it's the length of the Liberty that has been an issue. And I'm sure you want to probably start going on to talk about game 5 here soon. But, the Liberty are actually forcing Minnesota to really shoot a lot of low percentage shots that are contested. And to the Lynx credit, they made them last night. They made enough to get it done.
They made them. And I would also push back and say, in previous games, they were getting good looks, but the beauty of a good defensive scheme that forces you to take contested low percentage shots is when you start to get the better looks, you're worried. It's almost like a football player fearing the hit before it comes. Yeah. You are so used to expecting them on your shoulder, on your hip, that you're just rushing it. You're not in that same smooth motion that you consistently are. I do want to give myself a pat on the back because Dorka, Zandy, and BC come up big in that game.
How about
all three of those players?
How about the adjustment of Dorka instead of Hines Allen?
Huge. And here's my thing. Look, Cheryl Reeve has more playoff wins than any franchise in league history has. So hat to her. That's an insane stat. A goat of goats, as it were. So I'm going to sit down as I critique her moves because that's what we're supposed to do, right? But we're in game 4 and it's the first real minutes that Dorka's seen so far. And Dorka has some size. And Dorka, is not as fast and a juggernaut as a Myisha Hines Allen. My critique in game 3 was after Smith goes down with injury, you have limited minutes where you have minutes that Smith cannot be on the court. And instead of using those minutes to kind of 1-2 punch with Myisha and Dorka, give a little physicality, then Dorka get in there for a good defensive player who also has some finesse, who can hit a little bit more shots. So I would have liked to see that experiment of Dorka a little bit earlier in the series. That said, she lived for the moment. What a twist. And what does this do for Minnesota moving forward to game 5? Because now you can sit there and Reeve. Because look, if there's going to be one knock to Cheryl Reeve, it's that historically in the playoffs, she doesn't necessarily trust her depth as much. And so I think what we saw now is maybe she can trust them more. Yeah. And there's a little bit more confidence. Andalacini is a player who needed the confidence to hit shots and struggled at times throughout the series and hit big shots last game. There's so many things that I dissect from game 4. I think we should move on to game 5 because I agree with what you were saying. We were chatting about it yesterday. It seemed like New York's attempts in the paint were not as physically defensively embraced. So I understand why there was less foul calls, but also John Cole, last point I want to make on that is John Cole Jones went 6 for 6, hit 2 threes, couple normal shots, whatever. She was going insane. It seemed like they were doing a great job of feeding her. And then she got called for what I'll chalk up as a bigger player going up against a smaller player and getting called for a questionable foul call. I think it was a fine call, but I get why there's questionability to it. From that point forward, I didn't see her establish herself as much in the paint and dominate the paint as much. She moved out. She still hit some really big perimeter shots. But I think this has become, and I almost tweeted this out, but I didn't want to get, attacked on social media. So I'll say it on the podcast because less people hear this. But it almost feels like we've seen this before. John Cole Jones plays amazing in these playoff games where it's so super important and the rest of the team isn't showing up, but the team loses because she's the only one stepping up to the moment. It was her and Fibic. We do need to quickly talk about how we're not calling her a rookie, but just chef's kiss of a night from Leone Fibic.
Well, so impressive. It was those two. I mean, Benijah Laney Hamilton got the momentum going early on in the game and then kind of tapered off a little bit. Brianna Stewart, 5 of 21. Okay. I'll take that if I'm any opponent trying to go against this, like the Liberty. But that's again, like you can weather the storm of having an off shooting night from any of these superstars. Sabrina, 5 of 15, 0 for 5 from the 3-point line. I don't know that I realized that until now. That's unusual.
Stewie and Sabrina, 0 for 9 from the 3-point line.
I mean, I'll take that. And that's the craziest part about this game is it was so close. And like 2 of your franchise star players did not play well, and it was still a 2-point game. I mean, that's the type of like, I don't know if you want to call it luck, but the Lynx did enough defensively and maybe they were off. It's a combination of both to find a way to win. Do we expect that to happen again in game 5? I sure as hell don't, especially when they're back at home. But, that's the thing about the Liberty. When you're having an off shooting night from certain superstars, you're able to fill in the gaps. They still finish with 5 players in double figures. Both teams did. We talked about the margin of error of, just not even error, the margin of the shooting percentages. I mean, at the New York Liberty, let's be honest, they hit one more shot, it's a different game. That's really what it comes down to. If Sabrina hits that 3, not even that 3, hits a 3 earlier in the game, it's a different game. So it really does come down to shot making ability. But Fibich, so good. Jonquel Jones, so good. But only 10 shot attempts. And she's the highest percentage shooting player on this team right now in terms of just her efficiency. That's the part that kind of boggles my mind with this team sometimes is like, okay, we got somebody who's going off. We're 6 of 6 from the floor. Can't be stopped, 4 of 5 from the 3-point line at towards the end of the game. And like, we go away from it. Anyway, we've talked enough about it.
Well, the one other thing I want to say is holding Fibich 2 for 5 from the 3-point line, given what she's shooting this season in this playoffs, is impressive.
Felt like she went like 4 for 4 last night.
Side note, I love after she made some big buckets, the way she just stone face turns to play defense. There's no celebration. There's no it's just a flip.
Yeah.
As somebody who loves, that is, I mean, win me over with your personality. Why don't you? But the one thing I will say that I think needs to get credit is Nafisa Collier, a player who only scores 14 points, goes 4 for 10, struggled a little bit, 2 for 4 from the 3-point line, 4 for 6, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals. Great night in that regard. Was putting so much into this game defensively. I was texting this to you. It seemed like to me, she was putting so much energy and pressure. She was covering JJ because, Alana Smith's hurt. She was covering Stewie. She was switching over at times to Sabrina. She was all over the place, anchoring that defense. And it to me, it showed why her offense was struggling because there was so much energy and effort. And then you don't have your legs to make shots that she normally would make.
Well, and you credit the New York Liberty defensively. Anytime Nafisa Collier caught the ball in the paint, from 4 to 6 feet, she's got 3 people around her. I mean, not in terms of a trap, but like, digging in and just length. And we know the length of Jonquel Jones, Brianna Stewart, that causes feet issues. It does. It causes her issues. And so I think, there's just certain moments where she gets to her spots, but they are sending and it's drawing so much attention, as she should, because if Fee's going off for 30, it's like pick your poison, right? We'd rather eliminate Nafisa Collier in the paint at high percentage shots and force Minnesota to shoot contested tough shots, which if you look at the shot chart, that's exactly what it is. We want Courtney Williams shooting contested 19 feet pull-ups because we're going to win that game if you do that over the course of 40 minutes. And so I think that was a great point that you brought up about what Fee was having to exert defensively. Just 10 shot attempts. She's stretching the floor a little bit more because she has to, because there's not a ton of space in the paint for her right now. But still, 14 points, 4 assists, 9 rebounds. She's finding ways. But I think more than anything, like you said, the biggest aspect was what the issue she caused defensively for the Liberty last night.
All right, game 5 in New York, Sunday. No time to rest, no time for the week. I guess you can decide, Rachel, key players, key factors, make a prediction. Like, where do we want to go from this? Because to me, it's about the stars showing up. We've seen everything we've said for all the other games stand true for this. It's hard to win an away game in Barclays. Yes, there's all these elements, but at the end of the day, I think it comes down to the stars showing up For Minnesota, it's going to be about their bench producing. And for New York, more so than anything, it's the stars showing up. What do you think?
I think for the Minnesota Lynx, they're going to have to probably have their best defensive performance from top to bottom, in my opinion. They're going to have to do a better job on the glass, one way or another. Just find a way. That you cannot continue to give up this amount of offensive rebounds, especially on the road, in my opinion. So doing a better job on the glass, and I think, I mean, this comes down to shot making. It comes down to shot making, and we know how difficult the Liberty have made it for Minnesota to operate in the paint. And I think, again, it goes back to what Reeve talked about at the start of this series, was just how concerned she was with their sheer size and their sheer length. But you've got to continue to try. You've got to continue to get it inside, get out in transition, running in the open court. I think the Lynx do a great job when they put pressure on the Liberty. They've got them on their heels. They're getting them in foul trouble. We've seen Jonquel Jones in foul trouble. We've seen Brianna Stewart in foul trouble. Now, I don't think they've capitalized as well as they should at times. Like, Stewie goes out of the game for chunks of time and, they're still down one or up one. So I think you can't be complacent offensively and just falling in love, with those pull-up jumpers or perimeter shots, but you've got to make the perimeter shots. If Kayla McBride is out there stretching the floor, knocking down threes, I cannot stress enough how big perimeter shooting is and for both of these teams. And that kind of neutralized one another yesterday in game 4 because they both shot the same. And so, Kayla McBride's going to have to be really, really, really good. You're going to have Courtney Williams, who's playing confident and is shooting efficient. You can't have a ton of empty possessions out of Courtney Williams. You're going to have players like Heidemann, Zandalicini, that come in and put a little bit of pressure on Liberty's defense because, again, Nafisa Collier is going to demand so much respect. And I think when it comes to the Liberty, I've continued to say it, and I will always say it. I think Sabrina Ionescu is the X factor here. We talked about, there's been a couple times in this series where she's, been off, and this team, struggles when she doesn't make shots, when she doesn't make perimeter shots. I don't expect her to go 0 of 5 from the 3-point line again. Especially being back home and what this moment is, we know she's going to rise to the occasion. And so her shot making ability, I expect her to go, she might hit 4 or 5 threes on Sunday, just the way she bounces back. And so Sabrina being impactful, Stewie, doesn't have to go off for 30. I mean, she might, but, being able to not go 5 of 21, not as many missed shots and missed possessions. And I think the New York Liberty, they'll get more calls, but they can't just settle for that little 12-foot, runner, 13-foot, extended shot. And again, you credit Minnesota. They forced them to do that. So I think they've got to continue to pound it in the paint and stop going away from Jonquel Jones in key minutes in the second half.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it comes down to they need other players to produce, and then JJ in that clutch moment to just dominate, to break the back of Minnesota. On the Minnesota end, I'm with you. It's about depth. It's about shooting. It's about getting better rebounds. Also, something that I want fans to look at, something that struggles for Minnesota and the reason New York gets so many offensive rebounds, when you're shooting threes, and this is something I think maybe shout out to James Wade or Kurt Miller, or maybe it was Reeve who talked about this. When you shoot a three, the rebound location, where that ball is going to land for a rebound, often is deeper outside of the paint because there's more force on the ball. And so what we saw was Minnesota trying to be aware of the fact they've been out-rebounded all series, crash the paint. But as you're crashing the paint, sometimes it's ships in the night with the ball flying the other direction. A lot of the offensive rebounds New York gets, last night especially, was because Minnesota was team rebounding, crashing the boards, and then the ball goes over their head and they're not in position. I don't know a solution for that. Maybe some of our listeners do. Maybe the greatest rebounder to ever touch or grace our podcast airwaves as a co-host, Rachel Galligan.
I was not a great rebounder. I did okay. I was okay. But, man.
All right, instead of asking you your GOAT, Rachel, before we log off this episode, I want to know who's your finals MVP.
Hold on. We need to do predictions.
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry. All right. For to fill people in, before the playoffs started, anyone questioning this, listen clearly. I have it written down. Pre-playoff predictions, Rachel said New York in 5 over Minnesota. I said Minnesota in 4 over New York. I believe at some point I also said if it goes to 5, New York wins. But I can't agree with Rachel, and I know Rachel's going New York in 5, so I'm going Minnesota in 5. It's going to be a 1-point game again.
I don't have the
And
emotional factor that you have in it. I'm looking at it just truly as like a neutral, analyst.
First of all, let's be clear. I'm not picking Minnesota because of the emotional factor. I'm picking it because I don't want to agree with you. If you would have picked Minnesota, I would have gone New York. So let's just go. Clear.
Oh, man. Now, if this was the Chicago Sky, okay, the Fever, I live there, Midwest, that starts to pull on my heartstrings a little bit. But, I can be pretty just objective and just, fair here.
Yeah, New York's the favorite. They should win
it. They should win it, and I think they will win it. I think I just hope it's a great game. I hope that it's a storyline finish. I think there is potential for New York to go in there and just kind of run the gambit a little bit, which I hope that's not the case, even though that might be, better for whatever team doesn't win, right? If you just go in there and just get smacked, you're like, okay. I love this Minnesota Lynx team. I would be so happy really with either team who would win, but I just think New York being at home, they have looked consistently throughout the course of this series, just overall, like this sounds harsh. People are going to kill me, but they've just looked
the better team.
They've just got more juice, they've got more weaponry. They're big. This is their time. This is their time. I want it for the franchise, and I think they're going to get it done. But what was your question? Who's my finals MVP?
Yeah, no, first of all, let me be clear. I agree. I hate when I agree with you on all I agree with you on all these things. I think, look, there's a reason. And let me also put this out there. The best thing that could happen, I said before the game, Minnesota, for me to pick them, would need to win big. I flipped my script only because I believe Minnesota winning so closely, and everyone, I think rightfully so, going into game 5 expects New York to win. Minnesota being the underdog majorly going into game 5 is the best thing that could have happened for them. And I'm partially also saying that to give Rachel time to figure out who she wants to pick. But no, I truly believe that. What we've seen throughout this Minnesota Lynx, if there is an element of Minnesota sports fan lore that has seeped into the Lynx, it's the hangover after a impressive win when all of a sudden the media and the talking heads support you and think you're doing great. So I'm looking at that and I'm going, Minnesota Lynx, the underdog, no one expecting them to win. That's the best thing that could happen for them. Go, Rachel.
This is tough. It's got to be Brianna Stewart or Jonquel Jones, in my opinion. This is hard.
It's tough because Stewie's had a couple games where she really, really struggled.
Well, I wouldn't even say, okay, she had 11. That was probably her worst game. Game 3 had 30. Game 2, 21. Game 1 had 18. Is that correct? Am I reading that right? Yeah.
I think so.
Is that right? Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Minnesota did take game 1. So, and then you look at Jonquel Jones, and I'm just looking at points, 21, 13, 14, 24. I guess right now, obviously, I think this will probably be decided on game 5. No one knows who that's going to be right now. It's going to be very performance based on that. I'm guessing, I'm just going to go Brianna Stewart. I think she's going to elevate. She's not going to have another game, where she goes 5 of 21. I think she'll drop, at least 18 to 20 on Sunday, and that'll solidify it.
Yeah, I have to think if it's New York, it has to be her. I was laughing because I was like, damn, if Liberty win last night, Stewie probably wins finals MVP on that night would be like, woo. If Minnesota wins, obviously I think like we're going to see probably a recreation of the Commissioner's Cup in the sense of everyone knew it should have gone to Bridget Carleton. It goes to Fee. I would love if Minnesota wins. This isn't me making a prediction, but if Minnesota wins, I would love to see a Bridget Carleton, a Kayla McBride, or a Courtney Williams, or even Alana Smith. One of those other players. I know Fee has been amazing. I would have to look at the stats to see if it's even probable or possible, but it would be so heartwarming to see one of those other players get the finals MVP nod if they win, just because so often it's just the biggest name on the team happens to have, often does have that great game. I shouldn't say happens. But those are our thoughts. Excited to be back here, Rachel, after game 5. Recap, react, maybe have a little glass of champagne at like 10 in the morning while we record our next episode after the finals. Who knows? It'll be a great time. Appreciate you as always. And the season only has 1 or 2 more days left, but you'll get a couple more episodes from us. Talk to you later.